I never thought my own blood would try to destroy everything I worked for. But the day I discovered what my cousin had planned, I realized that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it comes from the person you trusted most, someone who grew up eating at the same table, sharing the same childhood memories, and laughing over the same inside jokes. My name is Daniel. I'm 36 years old, and for the past decade I've been running the family business, an old but successful chain of specialty stores my grandfather started right after the war. For me, it wasn't just about profit or prestige. This business was our family's heartbeat. It was the legacy my grandfather poured his soul into, and my father carried on with pride until he passed it to me. I always believed it was my duty, not just to protect it, but to make it thrive. And things were good. More than good, actually. The company was steady, our customers were loyal, and new opportunities were opening every year. We had just hit record profits, and I was in the middle of expanding to 2 new locations. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving as a business owner, I was thriving. My wife, Sarah, stood by my side through every late night and every risky decision, and even my parents, who had always worried I'd burn myself out, finally admitted they were proud of me. But then there was Ryan. Ryan is my cousin, my mother's sister's son. We grew up together, though saying we were close would be a stretch. Ryan had always been different. He was charming, the kind of guy who could walk into a room and have everyone eating out of the palm of his hand within minutes. But behind the smile, there was always something unsettling. I'd learned early on that Ryan's charm was never free, it always came with strings attached. Even as kids, he was the one who would borrow your toys and somehow never return them. As teenagers, he'd talk you into covering for him when he skipped curfew, promising he'd owe you, but of course, that favor never came back around. By the time we were adults, I thought I'd grown immune to his antics. I kept my distance. But blood is blood, and family dinners meant I couldn't avoid him completely. At first, Ryan showed a surprising amount of interest in the business. He asked me about sales, about strategies, about expansion plans. I thought maybe he had finally grown up, maybe he was genuinely proud of what I'd built. He would lean across the table at Sunday dinners and say things like, "Dan, you've really turned the family name into something big. Grandpa would be proud." It sounded sincere. Almost too sincere. Sarah warned me not to be so open with him. "Ryan's always been jealous of you," she whispered one night when we were cleaning up after a family gathering. "He doesn't ask questions because he cares. He asks because he wants to use it." I brushed her off at the time. Maybe I didn't want to believe she was right. After all, family was supposed to look out for each other. Right? Still, there were signs I couldn't ignore. Ryan always had a way of making my success about himself. If I mentioned that we'd closed a big deal, he'd smirk and say, "Well, if I had taken over the business, I would have done the same thing." If I said we were opening a new branch, he'd laugh and say, "Man, if only I had the startup capital, I'd be 10 steps ahead of you." His comments stung, but I kept swallowing them down. I told myself he was just insecure. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Friday evening, and I was in my office going over the week's numbers. The building was quiet, most of the staff had left hours ago. I remember the faint hum of the air conditioning, the glow of the desk lamp, the smell of old paper and ink that always clung to the place. My phone buzzed with a message. It was Ryan. "Hey cuz. I'm nearby. Mind if I drop in? Need to talk business." Business. That word made my stomach tighten. Ryan had never been directly involved in the company. He had no stake, no responsibilities, nothing. So why would he want to talk business? Against my better judgment, I told him to come by. When he arrived, he was dressed too sharply for a casual visit, tailored jacket, polished shoes, a flashy watch that practically screamed "Look at me." He sat down across from me, leaned back like he owned the place, and gave me that practiced smile I knew too well. Dan, he said smoothly, I've been thinking. You're doing great things here. Amazing things, really. But I can't help but notice, you're stretched thin. Expansion, hiring, all this stress. Don't you ever wish someone could take a little of that off your shoulders? The way he said it sent a chill through me. I forced a laugh. What are you getting at, Ryan? That's when he leaned forward, lowered his voice, and said something I will never forget. I have an offer. Someone wants to buy the business. $3 million. Cash. My blood ran cold. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. But there was none. His eyes were deadly serious, his smile just a little too smug. At that moment, I felt the ground beneath me shift. The family legacy, everything my grandfather had built, everything my father had protected, everything I had poured my life into, Ryan wanted to sell it. And worse, he thought he could convince me to go along with it. What Ryan didn't know was that there was something he hadn't accounted for. Something buried deep in the company's history, hidden in an old contract that no one else even remembered. Something that would change the game completely. But that's a revelation I'll never forget. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Ryan's words hung in the air like smoke, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. $3 million. Cash. He said it like it was a gift, like he was offering me a way out of some unbearable burden. But all I heard was betrayal. This business isn't for sale, I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Ryan tilted his head, unfazed. Come on, Dan. Don't be so sentimental. It's just a company. Bricks, shelves, products. You can build something else. But $3 million, in your pocket, right now? That's freedom. That's security. You could retire early, buy a mansion, travel the world. I slammed my fist on the desk. This isn't just a company. It's our family's legacy. Grandpa built this with his own hands. Dad poured his whole life into it. And now it's mine to protect. Do you have any idea what you're asking me to throw away? For the first time, Ryan's smile slipped. Just for a second. Then it returned, smooth as ever. Dan, you always cling to the past. You worship Grandpa like he's some saint. But the truth is, he's gone. And your dad's gone. You think they'd want you chained to this place until you die? Wake up. This is business. Not a shrine. The words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. For years, I had carried the weight of my grandfather's dream and my father's expectations. Sometimes the responsibility felt like a chain. But hearing Ryan say it, that it meant nothing, that it was just bricks and shelves, ignited a fury I couldn't contain. You don't get it, I hissed. You never will. Ryan leaned forward, his eyes hard now. I get it more than you think. Do you really believe you can keep this up? Expansion, competition, the economy shifting every month. You're not invincible, Dan. One wrong move, and everything comes crashing down. That's why I'm here. I can save you before you destroy yourself. Save me? I laughed bitterly. You're not here to save me. You're here because you want a cut. Who's behind this? Who's offering you the money? Ryan didn't answer right away. He stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the streetlights glowing in the distance. When he finally turned back, his face was unreadable. Let's just say I know people who see value where you only see burden, he said cryptically. That was when I knew. This wasn't just some half-baked idea of Ryan's. Someone was pulling strings behind him. Someone with real money, real influence, and a reason to want the company. And Ryan was the bait. I felt my hands clench into fists under the desk. If I hadn't been so careful all these years, if I hadn't gone through those old documents after Dad died, I might have panicked. But I had something Ryan didn't know about. Something that could unravel his entire scheme. The silence between us stretched. Finally, Ryan broke it. "You don't have to decide now," he said smoothly, adjusting his jacket. "But think about it. 3 million. No more sleepless nights, no more risk. Just freedom." He turned and walked out of my office like he owned the place, leaving me sitting there, my heart pounding, my mind racing. That night, I barely slept. Sarah noticed immediately. "What happened?" she asked, concern etched into her face as we sat in bed. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to drag her into this. But Sarah had always been my anchor, the one person who saw through Ryan's charm from the very beginning. She deserved to know. "Ryan wants me to sell the company," I said finally. Her eyes widened. "Sell it? To who?" He wouldn't say. Just that there's an offer. 3 million. He acted like he was doing me a favor. Sarah sat up straighter, anger flashing in her eyes. "I told you he was trouble. I told you he'd try something like this. Dan, he doesn't care about you or the business. He only cares about himself." I sighed. "I know. But this is bigger than him. Someone's backing him. Someone with deep pockets." "Then you need to be careful," Sarah warned. "If Ryan's involved, it's not just about money. It's about control. They want to take everything from you, and if you're not careful, they will." Her words echoed in my mind long after she fell asleep. She was right. Ryan wasn't capable of orchestrating something this big on his own. He was a pawn. But a pawn can still topple a king if you underestimate him. The following week, I noticed subtle changes. Ryan started showing up at the office more often, uninvited. He'd chat with employees, ask questions about operations, even linger around the warehouse like he belonged there. His presence unsettled everyone, but he brushed it off with that same easy charm. Then came the rumors. Whispers from suppliers, strange phone calls, deals suddenly delayed without explanation. It was as if someone was trying to tighten a noose around the company's neck. And at the center of it all was Ryan. One evening, I caught him in the conference room, flipping through files he had no business touching. "What the hell are you doing?" I barked, my voice echoing off the walls. He looked up, feigning innocence. "Relax, cuz. Just familiarizing myself. You never know, I might be running this place soon." That was the moment I realized Ryan wasn't just circling like a vulture. He was actively moving in for the kill. But he didn't know that I had already uncovered the one thing that could destroy his entire plan. A clause buried deep in the company's original partnership contract, an ironclad safeguard my grandfather had insisted on decades ago. A clause that meant the business could never be sold to outsiders without unanimous approval from direct family heirs. And I was the only heir left. What Ryan didn't know was that his entire scheme was built on quicksand. And when the truth came out, he wouldn't just lose the deal, he'd lose everything. But until then, I had to play the game. I had to let him think he was winning. Because if there's one thing I've learned about betrayal, it's this: the most dangerous enemy is the one who believes you've already surrendered. Ryan's visits became routine. Every few days, he showed up unannounced, walking through the halls like he owned the place, shaking hands with employees, throwing out suggestions as though he had authority. I could see the unease in their faces, the way they looked to me for reassurance. "He's not in charge," I told them firmly. "He never will be." But I knew appearances mattered. And Ryan was very good at appearances. One Friday afternoon, I walked into the break room and found him charming a group of younger staff members. He leaned casually against the counter, spinning some story about his business ventures abroad, painting himself as a self-made entrepreneur. The employees laughed politely, some even nodding with admiration. When he saw me, he grinned. "Ah, Dan. Just telling the crew about the time I closed a six-figure deal over dinner in Singapore. I didn't bother hiding my irritation. Funny. Last I checked, you were barely keeping your head above water in Miami. The laughter died instantly. Ryan's eyes narrowed for just a second before his smile returned. Always the skeptic, cousin. But don't worry. Soon enough, you'll see I know what I'm talking about. I left the room without another word, but my chest burned with anger. He was trying to win them over, to make himself look like the future while painting me as the past. That weekend, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. You can't let him keep this up, she said, her voice tight with frustration. He's poisoning the well. If your employees start believing in him, he'll have power from the inside. I know, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. But if I push back too hard, I'll look paranoid. The more I fight him openly, the more he plays the victim. Sarah turned to me. So what's your plan? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to confront Ryan head-on, to expose him immediately. But another part knew that patience was stronger than rage. If I revealed my trump card, the clause in the partnership contract, too soon, he'd simply find another way around it. I'm going to let him hang himself, I said finally. Sarah's brow furrowed. What do you mean? I'll play along. Let him think I'm considering the offer. The more confident he gets, the more reckless he'll become. And when the time is right. I paused, a cold determination settling over me. I'll pull the rug out from under him. The following week, Ryan upped the pressure. He scheduled a private meeting with me at a downtown restaurant. The kind of place where the wine list had no prices and the waiters wore tuxedos. When I arrived, Ryan was already there, with someone I didn't recognize. A tall man in his 50s, sharp suit, slicked back silver hair, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dan, Ryan said brightly, standing to greet me. Glad you came. I want you to meet Mr. Fletcher. The man extended his hand. His grip was firm, his gaze calculating. I've heard a lot about you, Fletcher said smoothly. Your grandfather built something remarkable. It would be a shame if it didn't reach its full potential. I sat down slowly, masking my suspicion. And you're the one who thinks he can take it further. Fletcher chuckled. Let's just say I have resources. Distribution channels, overseas connections, capital? Things your company could benefit from greatly. With my backing, and Ryan's fresh ideas, we could triple your revenue in 5 years. Maybe more. And all I have to do is sell my birthright. I asked dryly. Ryan jumped in, eager. Dan, listen. This isn't about selling out. It's about leveling up. You've done amazing work keeping things steady, but Fletcher can take us global. This is the chance of a lifetime. I studied them both, forcing myself to appear thoughtful instead of furious. What exactly are you offering? I asked carefully. Fletcher smiled thinly. $3 million for your share. Clean. Immediate. And, of course, you'd be free to walk away. No more stress, no more sleepless nights. Ryan leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. It's everything you've ever wanted, Dan. Freedom. Freedom. That was the word he kept using. But to me, it didn't sound like freedom. It sounded like exile. I set down my glass. I'll think about it, I said flatly. Ryan grinned, convinced he was winning. Fletcher simply nodded, as though he had already closed the deal. Over the next few days, I kept up the act. I pretended to weigh the offer, dropping hints of uncertainty when Ryan was around. The more I played the part of a hesitant but tempted owner, the bolder Ryan became. One evening, I overheard him on the phone in the parking lot. He didn't see me standing nearby in the shadows. Yeah, he's on the hook, Ryan said, pacing with excitement. A few more nudges and he'll fold. Fletcher's ready to wire the money the second Dan signs. Trust me, it's as good as done. My blood boiled. But I held my tongue. Because now, I knew exactly what I needed: evidence. Proof of Ryan's collusion. Proof that Fletcher and his investors weren't just making an offer, they were trying to corner me into submission. And once I had that proof, I could burn their scheme to the ground. But betrayal has a way of digging deeper than you expect. That Friday, Sarah came to me, pale and shaken. "What's wrong?" I asked immediately. She handed me her phone. It was a message, from an anonymous number. "Your wife deserves better than a man clinging to a dying business. Tell her to convince you to sell. Or the next message won't be so polite." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just business anymore. They had crossed a line. And in that moment, I swore to myself, Ryan may have thought he was playing a game, but he had just declared war. The message on Sarah's phone replayed in my mind like a siren. Someone out there thought they could scare us into submission, dragging my wife into this mess, crossing a line they could never uncross. I sat in my office late that night, the glow of the desk lamp flickering across stacks of old files. My grandfather's journals lay open before me. His words, written decades ago, carried more weight now than ever. A man's empire isn't measured by the profits he makes but by the legacy he leaves. Protect it, even when it costs you everything. I closed the book slowly. Grandfather had trusted me with this legacy, and I would not let Ryan, or anyone, steal it. That night, I called a private investigator I knew from college. His name was Blake, a man who specialized in peeling back the layers of business fraud. "I need everything on a man named Fletcher," I told him. "And I mean everything. Associates, bank records, shell companies. Whatever you can dig up." Blake's voice was calm on the other end. "You got it. I'll start tonight." Meanwhile, I played my role to perfection. To Ryan, I became the hesitant cousin still weighing the golden opportunity. I even let him believe Sarah was softening, that she was persuading me to sell for our family's peace of mind. The more he thought he was winning, the looser his tongue became. One afternoon, he waltzed into my office, dropped a glossy folder on my desk, and leaned back with that smug grin of his. "Draft agreement," he announced. "Fletcher's lawyers put this together. Once you sign, the funds transfer within 48 hours. Clean and simple." I flipped through the pages slowly, forcing my expression into one of forced neutrality. But my stomach churned. The contract was riddled with traps, non-compete clauses, waivers of liability, stipulations that would leave me powerless and penniless once I signed. I set the folder down. "It's a lot to consider," I said carefully. Ryan smirked. "Don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever." I met his eyes, letting a hint of steel into my voice. "Neither do mistakes." 2 days later, Blake returned with his findings. And what he uncovered nearly made my blood run cold. "Your cousin's partner, Fletcher, he's not who he claims to be," Blake explained, sliding a thick envelope across my desk. "He's been blacklisted by multiple international banks for laundering money. Runs half a dozen shell companies out of the Cayman Islands. And that's not all. The investors backing him. They're fronts for a syndicate that's under federal investigation." I stared at the documents, each page painting a clearer picture of the web I was caught in. "So if I had signed that contract, you'd be tied to their operation," Blake finished grimly. "When the feds come knocking, and they will, you'd go down with them. Prison time. Asset seizures. Everything your grandfather built would vanish overnight." I leaned back, my chest tight with both fury and relief. Fury at Ryan for dragging me into this mess. Relief that I hadn't caved. "Can you get me proof that Ryan knew about this?" I asked. Blake smirked. "Already did. Phone records, emails. He wasn't just a pawn. He's been working with Fletcher for months. Setting you up. The room spun for a moment as the reality sank in. Ryan hadn't stumbled into this by accident. He had orchestrated it, planning to destroy me while profiting off the ashes. That evening, I called a family meeting at the estate. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all the relatives who still had an emotional stake in the company. Ryan showed up late, strolling in with Fletcher at his side, both wearing smug confidence like armor. "Sorry we're late," Ryan said casually. "Had some business to attend to. But we're here now. Let's get started." I stood at the head of the long mahogany table, the folder of evidence resting before me. "Tonight," I began, "we settle the question of this company's future once and for all." Ryan smirked. "Glad you're finally ready to admit change is needed." But then I opened the folder and began laying out the documents. Bank statements. Shell company registrations. Email transcripts. One by one, I spread them across the table like cards in a rigged poker game. Gasps echoed around the room. "What is this?" Aunt Margaret demanded, clutching a page in disbelief. "Evidence," I said firmly. "Proof that Fletcher is no legitimate businessman. He is a criminal, laundering money through shell corporations. And Ryan," I turned to face my cousin directly, "knew it all along. He's been colluding with Fletcher for months to steal this company from under us." Ryan's face drained of color, but Fletcher spoke first, his voice calm and smooth. "Now, let's not be hasty. These documents could mean anything. Business is complicated. Surely you don't want to throw away a lucrative deal over a few misunderstandings." But Blake, who had been waiting silently in the corner, stepped forward and dropped a recording device on the table. He pressed play. Ryan's voice filled the room, clear and undeniable. "Dan's gullible. He'll fold. Once Fletcher wires the money, the company's ours. By the time he realizes what happened, it'll be too late." The room erupted. Shouts. Accusations. Disbelief. Ryan shot to his feet, his face red with panic. "This is out of context. He's twisting it." "Enough," I roared, slamming my hand on the table. The room fell silent. I looked around at my family, my voice steady, unwavering. "Grandfather left me this company because he trusted me to protect it. And I will. Ryan has betrayed not just me, but all of you. If he had succeeded, we'd all be ruined." Silence hung heavy. Finally, Uncle Thomas spoke, his voice low and certain. "Ryan is finished. Dan, you have our support." Ryan's mouth opened, but no words came. Fletcher scowled, grabbed his coat, and stormed out without another word. Later that night, I found Ryan alone in the driveway, his shoulders slumped, his swagger gone. "You think this is over?" he hissed when he saw me. "You embarrassed me. You destroyed my chance. But mark my words, Dan, one day, you'll regret this." I stared at him, my anger giving way to something colder. "No, Ryan," I said quietly. "The only thing I'll regret is that I ever believed you could change." And with that, I walked back inside, leaving him standing in the shadows. The night after the family meeting, I barely slept. Even though I had exposed Ryan and Fletcher, something gnawed at me. Ryan's last words lingered like a curse. "One day, you'll regret this." I knew my cousin too well. Humiliation wasn't enough to stop him. He would come back, nastier and more desperate than ever. And I was right. The following morning, Sarah rushed into my office, pale and breathless. "Daniel, turn on the news." I grabbed the remote, and the screen flickered to a live broadcast. A well-groomed anchor was speaking calmly, but the words felt like a blade cutting through my chest. "Breaking news this morning, allegations of financial misconduct have surfaced against the Winston Corporation. Leaked documents suggest the company has been funneling money through offshore accounts." I muted the TV, my pulse hammering. Leaked documents. Allegations. Offshore accounts. It was exactly what Ryan had threatened, a smear campaign designed to destroy me publicly after failing privately. Sarah looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. What do we do? I forced myself to breathe. We fight back. With the truth. Within hours, the company's phone lines were buzzing nonstop. Reporters demanded statements. Investors threatened to pull out. Some board members even called for my resignation. Ryan had timed it perfectly. But what he didn't know was that I still had an ace up my sleeve. Blake had warned me about Fletcher's syndicate, and we had quietly handed over the evidence to federal investigators days earlier. Now, I just needed to bring the hammer down at the right moment. I called a press conference for the next afternoon. The ballroom was packed with cameras, reporters shouting questions, flashes blinding me as I stepped onto the stage. My palms were damp, but my voice was steady when I spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today accused of crimes I did not commit. Allegations have been made against Winston Corporation, claiming we launder money through offshore accounts. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I paused, then held up a folder. These claims are lies, manufactured by individuals who sought to steal this company for themselves. Individuals who have already been exposed for their corruption. I motioned to Blake, who stepped forward with a laptop connected to the projector. The screen behind me lit up with documents, bank statements, and recordings, the same evidence we had shown the family, now revealed to the world. Ryan Winston and his associate, Mr. Fletcher, are the ones behind these schemes. They attempted to trick me into signing away my family's legacy. And when I refused, they retaliated by fabricating this smear campaign. Gasps filled the room. Cameras zoomed closer. I let the moment sink in before adding the final blow. And as of this morning, Fletcher has been arrested on federal charges, thanks to an ongoing investigation into his criminal syndicate. Ryan Winston is under investigation for collusion. The room erupted in chaos, reporters shouting, flashes strobing like lightning. But through the chaos, I stood firm, my grandfather's legacy burning like fire in my chest. Later that evening, as the press conference dominated the headlines, I received a call. It was Ryan. His voice was hoarse, broken. "You ruined me, Dan. Do you even realize what you've done?" I clenched the phone. "No, Ryan. You ruined yourself the moment you betrayed your family." There was a long silence. Then he whispered, almost bitterly, "You sound just like him." I frowned. "Like who?" "Grandfather." His voice cracked, and then the line went dead. For the first time, I felt something unexpected, pity. Ryan had wanted the empire, the money, the power. But deep down, maybe what he wanted most was grandfather's approval. The one thing he never truly had. In the weeks that followed, the storm began to clear. The investigation cleared Winston Corporation of all wrongdoing. Investors who had fled came back, reassured by the transparency. And for the first time in months, I walked into the office without the weight of betrayal on my shoulders. Sarah stood beside me, her hand slipping into mine. "It's over," she whispered. I nodded. "Yes. But we'll never forget what it cost." One evening, I returned to grandfather's study, the room where it had all begun. His journals still lined the shelves, the air still carrying the faint scent of leather and old wood. I placed my hand on his worn chair and whispered softly, "I kept my promise. The legacy lives on." And in that moment, I felt it, not just pride, but peace. Ryan had tried to break me. He had nearly destroyed everything. But in the end, the company survived, my family stood stronger, and the truth had prevailed. Betrayal had left its scars, yes. But it had also carved out a lesson I would never forget. Trust is fragile. Loyalty is priceless. And legacy. Legacy is worth everything.